everyone, delighted to be here today and another video for Men's Health Week. And today it's absolutely brilliant to be chatting to the wonderful Sarah Coghlan, who is a men's health advisor and spokesperson at Movember.
Hi, Lynn.
So you may know Movember for the famous moustache event that happens at a particular time of year. But they're a really incredible organisation that are really driving transformational change. So I wanted to just share with you today some of the brilliant work that Sarah and the team are doing. So men's health is at the heart of Movember and at the heart of your job title as well, Sarah.
It is.
I know you're having a hugely significant impact on men's health issues as an organisation. Can you just give us a few headlines about what you're working on, what some of the big projects are at the moment?
Yeah, so I think people do hopefully know that we get men to grow moustaches in November, and that's certainly where we started this journey 20 years ago. I think the ambition early on was to really break down stigma and get people talking about men's health, getting men to think about their health, but getting those around men to also participate in improving their health. And over the last 20 years, we've come to recognise that there's quite a lot going on in men's health. We have our priority cause areas, which we'll go on to talk about, but more holistically, I think there are three things kind of holding the problems of men's health in place. And when we talk about the problems with men's health, we're still seeing men die 5 years younger than women for largely preventable reasons. We're losing a lot of men in their middle years. And I think that is having a significant impact. It's having an impact on our economy, and it's having an impact on women, children, and the communities in which men are living in, because men in poor health and men who die younger than they need to can the burden of that kind of falls to all of us around them. So if we can improve their health outcomes, I think we can all benefit from that. So the big focus for us has been to understand beyond those sort of specific causes and what's going on in each of those. I think what we see is there's the individual behaviour of men, and we often hear, well, men are risk takers, men don't look after themselves, men don't talk. So there's a lot of, I suppose, responsibility placed at the feet of individual men. And to a certain extent, that needs to be addressed. And we do need men to shift their behaviours. We need them to engage in more positive aspects of masculinity. We need them to think about how to improve their mental health and know their risks of different health issues that are specific to them. But there are other things at play, and I think you and I are probably going to talk about it today. Some of those systematic issues sitting around men. So when men do turn up into a healthcare setting or seek help from others, is the system that they're turning up in supportive of them and responsive to them in a way that is encouraging and beneficial and sees an improvement? And then the third piece is really some of these social norms sitting around what it is to be a man. And there's still a lot going on in the norming space as to men being stoic and silent and self-reliant, and how much does that play into? I sort of think of it as three spinning plates at all times. You know, we're going to spin them all to see really significant population change.
Yeah, brilliant. So, I mean, without doubt, men's health is something we should all really care about, and I think there's a big opportunity for individuals and businesses to drive positive change. So I know you focus on three areas in terms of men's health specifically, so testicular cancer, prostate cancer, and men's mental health and suicide prevention. So I think it'd be great to go through each of those and just have a think about, what do men need to know and do?
Sure.
And what do others need to be aware of? So maybe we start with testicular cancer.
So testicular cancer is predominantly a younger men's cancer. It isn't the most prevalent cancer, and in fact, we've come a really long way in treatment and survival rates. Testicular cancer has a really high survival rate. We're seeing massive improvements in the last 15 years. We're getting close to 97, 98% survival, which is fantastic because it really it affects men quite young. So teenage men, young adult men, and then right through until early 40s, sort of late 40s. And so the key message in testicular cancer is understanding whether you have any familiar history, because we still see very strong links within families, and really checking yourself. And the reason we continue to invest in the biomedical understandings around castrate-resistant treatment and some of the kind of chemo-resistant treatments is really the main focus of our biomedical research. I think the main focus of our awareness and campaigning piece is getting men to check their testicles, like getting to know their nuts is kind of the campaign we run, Know Thy Nuts. And if you notice any change, do something about it. And so there's a core educational element there, really targeted at younger men. And one of the reasons we do that is if we can get young men to have a bit of a laugh at a campaign that's about their nuts and about checking themselves before they wreck themselves, I think we can start to get them engaging in the idea of having health and having that in their own hands and something that they can take care of for life. So it's a really important one for us. It's a conversation we really push in April because that is Testicular Cancer Awareness Month. We see much higher levels of participants in the Movember campaign regularly checking themselves than the general public. And I think it is just that it cuts through. It is a cancer that is still affecting young men more than it needs to. And way too many young men still, maybe spotting that they've got a lump or they're in pain or something's not right, but not doing anything about it. And it is very highly treatable and with a very high recovery rate. And the other bit I'd say about that is, as much as it is highly treatable, it is still a very life-altering experience to go through a cancer journey quite quickly. If you are diagnosed with testicular cancer, you might be in your early 20s, maybe you're not in a serious relationship, haven't decided whether you want to have children. Quite quickly, you'll be told that you're likely to probably lose one, if not both testicles. You'll have to be thinking about fertility. Will you want to sort of save some sperm for a later point? And they're quite confronting big things and, life-changing conversations. And it can happen quite quickly, that journey from a medical point of view. And young men can sort of be, I don't want to say spat out the other end, but certainly, finished up at the other end without really thinking about all the mental health aspects of that and the kind of knock that it's taken. So we do have some wonderful tools and resources at Movember.com. Under Nuts and Bolts is the heading, to really help men understand the journey they're going through, talk to other men who've been through it, help navigate through the other side and living with and beyond cancer in a positive way. So that's our main message in testicular cancer is know your nuts. When you're in the shower, check them regularly, once a month, every couple of months. If you notice change, please see a medical professional.
Yeah. So similar to breast cancer,
very
check
similar.
regularly.
Yeah.
Once a month on the same day, but guys listening, check your nuts. And other people, get the men to check their nuts.
Yeah, I think that's the other thing. We often don't talk to women about these things, but women are likely to be mothers of young men, and actually knowing that they need to teach their young men to do this is like really critical. So I think we all, and this is again where it isn't an either or thing, men's health, it affects us all, and you are likely to have sons as much as you are to have daughters. So as a mother, it's really important that that when you're putting a young teenage boy is going to the shower, it's like, don't forget, check yourself, these conversations that break down stigma around health.
Yeah, brilliant. And so what about prostate cancer? That's the other
so I think prostate cancer is a much more complicated cancer space. When we first, prostate cancer is where we started our journey. So in 2003, when we started Movember, and in 2004, when we really started recognizing that there was something strong and powerful about the campaign and where would that money go, prostate cancer was the most obvious place. Prostate cancer was killing as many men as breast cancer was women, and there was no attention 20 years ago. There was very little funding. And so Movember has made a significant impact on the face of biomedical research and clinical registries and all of the kind of pathways for prostate cancer. We know a lot more than we knew then. We know there are 47 different types of prostate cancer. We're getting a lot closer to better understanding whether the type of cancer you have is a pussycat or a tiger. So unlike breast cancer, prostate cancer is still one of those cancers that you may die with rather than of. And it's still a big part of the prostate cancer journey is to be able to better define the aggressive tumours from the non-aggressive tumours. And we've come a long way with that. And I think that in the next 7 to 10 years, we should not see men dying of prostate cancer, which is extraordinary when you think where we are today. The thing for men to know about prostate cancer, and again for all of us to know, is 50 is the number. On your 50th birthday or thereabouts, a PSA test is something that every man should ask for. That is a blood test. It is not invasive. It's not the things men think it's going to be. A PSA test will establish your prostate specific antigen levels, and from there you know, you may go on to have a biopsy, you may go on to be monitored regularly, or you may be fine and your PSA is very low and not an issue. But knowing those numbers is very powerful, and it's what gives you the ability to monitor and have that kind of opportunity for early intervention if you are going to be diagnosed with prostate cancer. Now, 1 in 8 men in the UK will be diagnosed, so it isn't an insignificant number. And then there are 2 other risk factors. So age being the first one, and 50 is not that old anymore as I approach that number myself. I don't think of it as an old person's number. So I think we once thought of prostate cancer as an old man's disease. I wouldn't say a man at 50 is old at all, but you need to know that that's a number. The other 2 factors are family history. So if you have a brother, a grandfather, a father, an uncle who had prostate cancer, you're 2.5 times more likely to get prostate cancer. And we would we would recommend that that's a conversation for a PSA test at 45 for a man with family history. And black men. So black men are 2.5 times more likely to get prostate cancer than white men. And there's still a lot of research building into the understanding of that. But knowing that, we need to make sure black men understand their risks, and they need to be asking for those PSA tests at 45. And a black man with family history really should be asking for that PSA test at 40, which is a lot younger. And I think there's still a lot of debate around PSA tests. There's still a lot of confusion as to whether it's a good thing or a bad thing. Do we end up with a whole lot of worried well? There are 2 really big trials going on across the UK and Europe to really finally establish whether risk stratified screening of men would actually decrease mortality rates, and we'll see the outcomes in the next couple of years. But from an individual level, I would say if you know a man with any one of those risk factors, family history, a black man, a 50-year-old man, tell him to have a PSA test and just get that sort of knocked over and understand what your risk is.
Yeah. Yes, it's about being proactive.
It is, it really is. And we have this thing of November, it's like, know your numbers. And it's so true, like knowing your family history, knowing your numbers. These are just things you can easily do. And then from the point of diagnosis, I think that's where prostate cancer can be really confusing for people sporting someone with prostate cancer and a man with prostate cancer. We still have lots of treatment pathways. We are getting to much better places where those treatment pathways are becoming more personalised. We do have much better survival rates than we had even 10 years ago. So it is not a death sentence. You should not be worried about getting that PSA test. If you are diagnosed early, you're likely to have a 78-80% survival rate. If you are diagnosed late and the prostate cancer has left the prostate, that drops to like 23%. So if you're going to be in one of those buckets, I always say to men, you want to be in the bucket with the 78% survival rate. You don't want to be turning up when that prostate cancer has left the prostate walls and metastasized. So as much as possible, I passionately believe, again, it's just about empowering men with the information so they can go and make those, appointments and have those conversations with health professionals.
Brilliant. And then you've already touched on mental health in terms of, the fallout from having cancer and the complications that can bring. But, we all have mental health every day of our lives, and, life isn't simple. It's a roller coaster of twists and turns. So what would your thoughts be in that space?
It's such an interesting space, and it's one that I feel like you and I can have a conversation about now that was far less likely 10 or 15 years ago, particularly with an audience of men. Men's Health Week, when I arrived in the UK 17 years ago, no one wanted to talk to me in Men's Health Week. Like the idea of going into a business and hosting a panel would just have been like, no way, why do men need a week? But actually that's really shifted, and we see in big corporates, and we see in community settings, and we see in workplaces across the country, people requesting more and more conversations about men's health. And I think that's because of the mental health issues that we see playing out, and the awareness and the stigma we've managed to reduce. And the important thing for me is that those audiences turning up are starting to be quite mixed, and we are seeing men turn up in those audiences, not just women, and we are seeing men sitting and talking about their challenging moments and being honest, men in leadership, men in senior positions, being really honest about maybe accessing an EAP service when they were going through a tough time, or how difficult they found their marriage breakdown. So I think stigma reduction has helped a lot, and I'd like to think Movember has contributed to that over the last 20 years, but there's many others who have too. We still have a long way to go with men. 3/4 of all suicide in the UK and in every market we work with are men. 13 men today will die by their own hand, 13 men tomorrow and yesterday. We're still not really talking about that at a public level. And those suicides go on to have devastating effects for those around them. You know, a suicide on average affects around about 125 people in their direct and immediate circles. And I think if you've known anyone who's lost someone to suicide, it is a unique death that has ongoing, lifelong kind of trauma attached to it for those surviving it. And I think what a big part of that is knowing that you may have been able to intervene, that maybe there was an opportunity to step in. And so for all of us to be able to spot those signs when a man's not doing so well, and I'm not suggesting that every suicide is recoverable and that every suicide is necessarily intervenable by a general average person, but I think we could all do a better job of looking out for each other. So when you spot those signs of change, when a man is maybe removing himself from regular things he once enjoyed, he's not turning up to football practice, he's not catching up with mates after work, when a man is becoming angrier, when he's resorting to poor coping mechanisms, he's drinking more, he's doing more drugs, he's working more, these are signs that something isn't going right. And I think what we see is men tend to keep driving that car until the wheels have fallen off and the smoke's coming out the engine and the whole thing's falling over, rather than sort of doing something about it. And again, this can be often because maybe the system around them isn't very responsive when they do reach out for help. Maybe they don't have a positive experience of that, or maybe they just think it is very weak and unmanly to do that. And I think if you've spoken to anyone who's helped a man or supported a man or been a man through a mental health issue, the strongest thing you could do is reach out and seek help, because I think that is the moment where people are able to sort of contribute to your life and help you. It's a really mutually reinforcing, there's reciprocity in that. We all want to help those people we love around us. So there's a lot going on in that space. We know there are critical points in a man's life where his mental health might deteriorate, things like leaving full-time education for the first time, becoming a father. You know, we know there's a huge amount of attention on women when they become mothers, and that's very appropriate and right, but there's a huge amount of burden and a lot going on for men too, and there can be a lot of isolation, there can be a lot of financial pressure, and just a lot of overwhelming emotions. So I think we need to be a bit more aware of new dads and thinking about, you know, what's going on in that moment and how we might support them, because their mental health will definitely be under sort of attack in some way. When a man loses his job is a really critical point. And the other one is relationship breakdown. I think we don't often recognise that somewhere near 70-75% of all men going through divorce will register some level of mild to moderate depression. And so I don't think we give a lot of space to that. And you know, always talk about awkward conversations. It can be really hard to sit in awkward conversations where you don't have the answers and you can't solve someone's problems. But listening and sitting in that space is one of the greatest gifts you can give to someone you care about. So I think being able to recognise again that someone is going through something, you don't have to have the answers and you're unlikely to have them. What you have to do is be willing to sit and explore what's going on and then be able to point them in the right direction.
Yes. Yeah. I love what you're saying, and it's sometimes those signs aren't obvious, are they? You know, people might appear happy, but if you see some of those other things going on, then those are signs to open a more direct conversation about it. But even simple things like, you know, I love the concept of saying, "How are you today?" out of 10. Yeah, because such a great one. We all say, "Oh, I'm fine," and you move on without actually sharing how you really are.
We talk about second and third questions. You know, don't let that first question go with "I'm fine." The follow-up question: "Oh, are you? Because I've noticed that you're not, you know, you're not turning up to the work socials where you were, or I noticed that, you know, it seems to me that this is going on." So being able to follow up with that second and third question, if you know something isn't right in someone that you know well, I think you have to push a little bit, but you've got to find that safe space. Men will open up, you know, whilst doing something, and men will open up shoulder to shoulder. They're unlikely to open up face to face. We know this about, you know, the way men talk. And this is why there do need to be gendered approaches to some of the work we do.
Yes. Yeah, I think those insights are really powerful. So you've touched a little bit on some of the things that businesses are doing to raise awareness of men's health issues. You know, what would you like to see business leaders doing now to more actively and proactively take care of the well-being of the men in their workforces?
Oh, there's so much. Firstly, they should be offering, I think you have to start with really obvious things that I know are going to cost workplaces a lot of money, and, you know, it's hard to tackle, but equal parenting, you know, equal opportunity within parental leave, giving men the space to play an active and participatory role as a new parent alongside women, I think will transform families, transform the workplace, and the relationship between fathers and their children. So I think that's a big, really key one for me with workplaces. I think we do a lot in big workplaces. There can often be, you know, networks and groups set up, and that's all fantastic. And we're seeing movement there. We need to do better at role modeling and celebrating men who step forward and sort of say, I wasn't doing very well, so I took time off and I'm back and I'm doing well, and these are the things I did. So giving those spaces to celebrate and role model good behaviour from men when things are going, you know, maybe a little bit skewy for them, and they take that active step to do something. The more we can do that, the more it shows other people in the workplace that it's permissible and it doesn't affect your career, and you can still go on and have other very positive moments. I think role modeling is really important. And then I think there are different workplaces, right? Like there are small to medium size workplaces. There are construction sites. There are workplaces that are less formal and less equipped to have the space and the luxury of some of what we see more in sort of more big office environments. And we need to think about how those workplaces can offer that support. And that may be partnering with great organisations like Mates in Construction, who can come in and host workshops and get that conversation going. It might be about accessing tools. There's such great tools and resources on charity websites all around the place as to specific things about men, especially if you're in a very male-dominated workplace, that could help open those conversations and do more with it. And I think for me, the message is always, obviously, we know men who do Movember show, you know, statistically, we've done lots of research over the years. The men who do Movember are far more likely statistically to reach out to a mate when going through a tough time, to seek help from a doctor when they notice change. Like the things we want to see men do, men who do Movember do those things at scale. So doing Movember is likely to submerge them in the content that we provide and the messaging that we give up, and maybe getting them thinking about it. So I always say to workplaces, you know, do Movember for the men in your workplace, because I think it's the easiest, funnest way to maybe cut through in some difficult conversations.
Yeah, I love that. And I think that honesty is really important. I know, was it Rise Creative Equals event recently, and Stephen Bartlett talked about vulnerability. And just being more transparent. And I noticed recently he did a post on LinkedIn about some of the pressure he'd been under, and one of his team had taken a photo of him, you know, head in hands, and he was really transparent, and that had over 50,000 likes. So that honesty is welcomed and embraced, because we're all human.
I thought he was fantastic, wasn't he? Like, he was very honest about some of his challenges. And again, a young Black man sitting on stage who's incredibly successful, but talking about going through really tough times. That's so important. If you can't see it, you can't be it, right? So How do we do more of that for showcasing what men are capable of?
So you've touched a little bit already on how to communicate with men, and the fact that we have to think really hard about that and not assume that, you know, the same approach will work for everybody. And the work that we've done on the gender and stereotype metric that we developed at Kantar with the Unstereotype Alliance shows that when you portray men positively, and everybody, but, you know, we're focusing here today on men, when you portray men positively, that's not only the right thing to do for society, but it also means your advertising is more effective. So it's a no-brainer. But I'd love to know, how do you feel about the way men are portrayed in advertising nowadays? And what do you think needs to change to help support the momentum we need to improve men's well-being and just that happiness in life?
I think it's something we're really conscious of at Movember, because we're a brand-led organisation, right? So we were born as a brand. Before we were anything, we were a fun campaign and a cool brand, and then, you know, turned into a big foundation and charity. So I think we're always conscious of how we show ourselves and represent the brand, but the men that we serve and the women and others who support us. And so this idea of how you turn up and how you represent has always been really important. hand on heart, we won't always get it right. We haven't always got it right. I think that stereotypes are so important, which is why we're really proud to be alliance members within the Unstereotype Alliance. I think we're learning and seeing such a commitment from them as well to thinking about whether we've left men and boys behind. You know, the name of the panel at Rise that addressed this, that we've got representation on. I think it's so interesting when we look at some of the really startling statistics and worrying behaviours coming out of the manosphere and young men, and this idea of young men being more adherent to traditional stereotypes. And we know that those stereotypes don't serve them well. So we've got to do something, you know, to really disrupt that. And brands have an opportunity to do that. I think the way that they represent men and put them out into the world creates norms. And I'm a big believer in the power of norms alongside individual behaviour change. And that work and that panel is kind of, I've learned so much over the last couple of years, just even, you know, Dr. Rebecca Swift's work in doing that research, looking at images and the way we're portraying men, right?
Yes.
Like we think that we've improved things, but when she shows some of those images from the 50s and the 60s, men are smiling, they're surrounded by people who love them. Okay, there might be some very traditional role models going on that we definitely wanted to address, with him being the breadwinner coming home from work, but he's still seen as somebody warm and approachable. And then we move through the 80s and the 90s to where we are today, and those images are so individual, they are so aloof and isolated, and you worry as to what message does that send, and what are we telling men they have to be. There is this confusing time for men. It's talked about a lot, obviously, but there are so many different messages being thrown at young men as to what a man is. And I think we need to be really deliberate and intentional in the way we represent men more holistically in all the ways they can be men through advertising and brands.
Yeah, I think it's exactly that. You know, with what you just said then, you've nailed it brilliantly. And, you know, what I want to see businesses doing is making that a priority and not an afterthought, because I think, you know, often the emphasis is on groups who we don't see represented, which is absolutely right. But we also need to think really hard about how we portray men, so we evolve that, because what people see on screen in advertising and in the media shapes how we think we should show up and how others will interact with us. So it's a really great opportunity for brands to make a difference and do things more effectively as well.
I think the work that we see, even again in that panel from Fernando's group at New Macho, points to that as well. It's like in research, men are telling them they would like to see more, you know, more versions of healthy men being, you know, all the myriads of the ways they can turn up, and yet brands aren't really responding. And when we did quite a big piece of ethnography 6 months ago, 6 months worth of work with young men across the UK, and that work showed us this real perception gap. These young guys were telling us they want to be more progressive. They'd love to show a broader spectrum of what it is to be a man, but they see no permission around them in advertising, in brands online to do that. Nothing they see shows them that that would be okay. And that's so we sort of named that the perception gap. But that's a real challenge. I think we all need to fill that gap, or else the only thing they'll see is Andrew Tate and, you know, super woke on the other side, and they want to be somewhere in the middle of that.
Yes, I think it's showing empathy for men, isn't it? And showing men, as you say, in all of the different brilliant ways they show up in life, because they're not one stereotype.
No, no more than women are, I think. And often I think I get challenged a little bit on that sometimes, but I always like to say I am in no way saying men need to be like women. Men need to be just all the ways in which men can be men, that's all.
Totally. Yes, totally. Yeah. So I know you've done some work with Kantar, looking at some of the content you've created. How has that helped you get to a better place?
Oh, it always helps, because I think everything, well, in the health promotion portfolio I led for many years, that work is all about being informed by the target audience. You know, when you're trying to do behaviour change work through media and communications, you have to be so targeted in on the groups that you're looking to shift that specific behaviour with. And work like the work we've done with Kantar, whether that's be understanding the response to a documentary film we're making in New Zealand, Kantar did the work with us there, or whether it's understanding young men's consumption of YouTube content, you know, to invest in these types of pieces of work, which are risky and sort of are a bit outside of the traditional scope. You have to know what effect it's having, but you also have to know what the voice of those, you know, that user generated user designed voice has to be all the way through it. So I think we've learned a lot. I mean, even in the piece we did with YouTube influencers, we had all the initial research back on 16 to 19-year-old men across the UK from low socioeconomic backgrounds. We knew a lot about them. We'd spent 6 months in ethnography. But when it came to designing a campaign, at the end of the day, it was a bunch of sort of 30 to 50-year-olds sitting in a creative room sort of coming up with ideas. And then when we put it in front of the focus group, they were just like, what? We don't talk like that. What are you talking about? So I just think those, and then it totally flipped. And the whole thing has been immensely successful. You know, through that YouTube work, we've reached 48% of young men in the country have watched at least one piece of content. That content is likely to see a young man be more open and vulnerable with his friends. You know, there's really significant results there. So you know, that work is beautiful and effective, I would say, because we put the voice of young men in it, and you do that through work like what we've done with Kantar and others to be able to hold those conversations and focus groups in a really strategic way that informs the work in that user-centered design approach.
It's that authenticity, isn't it?
Absolutely.
I like to think about, you know, you need to create communications that raw.
Yeah.
So, you know, you get return on authentic representation. You've got to communicate in a way that resonates with your audience, not you.
Yeah, and you've just got to be really honest. I'm a 50-year-old middle-aged white lady. I don't know anything about what it's like to be 16 living in Leeds right now as a young man. Do you know what I mean? So I shouldn't guess at it. It's just not appropriate for me to guess at it. I need to use data points and insight to understand the best way to do that work.
Brilliant. So you've started to touch on kind of boys and younger men. So we've talked a lot about men. What are you finding life is like for boys today? And again, you know, how can brands and businesses help make life better?
Yeah, I think it's a real focus for us. So our new strategic direction has young men as a core priority audience. We're looking at young men through sport, getting to young men through sport settings, getting to young men through gaming. It's a really big space, emerging space, both positively and negatively. I think people can often think, oh, gaming all negative, but actually
that with my son.
A lot of young men use gaming as a way to communicate and create friendship and connection. And, you know, back to the mental health point, social connection is the greatest protective factor for your life and your mental health. So we know that strong social connections are, you know, going to give you the scaffolding, the emotional scaffolding to get through tough times. So if that is coming through gaming for a lot of young men, you know, we shouldn't just throw the baby out with the bathwater and assume that it's all bad. And it's yet to really be proven. So there's a lot more work to be done. I'd say there's a lot of research to be done on the positive and negative effects of gaming. We're doing a lot of work trying to understand the effects of the manosphere on young men. So we know that there are, you know, there's a huge amount of chat about the harms of the manosphere, and there is very little evidence at this stage to link, you know, manosphere kind of engagement and consumption to mental health outcomes. So we're doing that research now. We're doing some with TikTok and some on our own to really try and understand through the voice of young men and their lived experience how this might be affecting their mental health. So rather than, again, jumping to the assumption that it is, let's find out from them what is playing out. I think as part of that research, we've had the privilege of really diving quite deep into understanding how they get to the manosphere, why they get there, what happens when they get there. There's two parts of it for me. There's a really challenging part, which is some of it is terrifying when you look at the way the algorithms are designed, when you look at the way a lot of these young men go looking for answers to really, you know, timeless questions. How do I get a girlfriend? How do I make sure my mates think I'm cool? Like, how do I be a good man? And quite quickly, they're being served up quite derogative, misogynistic, you know, it doesn't start there, but it becomes quite quickly pulled into that space. And one of the researchers we were working with was sort of saying, it's a bit like in the 80s, a young boy might have had a porn magazine under his bed, and he would, you know, flip through it. Maybe he'd close the cover and put it under his bed and hope his mum or dad didn't find it. But it's likely your parents knew it was there for a start. They probably knew the content in it. And that was it. Whereas this today is like, shut that cover, a more extreme version is in your hands immediately. And then a more extreme version, a more extreme version. And your parents have very little perspective and oversight of that content that you're being served up. So there's kind of a lot going on in that space that is worrying, I would say. But alongside that, I see just an enormous opportunity of hope and intervention, because at the same time as you know, young men are struggling to figure out how to turn up and where to turn up. But I think that fact that they're interested in being better, in being a more improved version, in not going down well-trodden paths, means that there's room for us to show them different outcomes, different versions, different content. To, you know, how do we make sure that the good content that is showcasing or role modeling what it is to be a healthy young man and a positive influence on others is getting in that feed? Like, how do brands work with the right influencers? How do we elevate content? How do we fill that gap between the far extremes that are sort of sitting there at the moment of, I'm either got to be super woke or I've got to be super toxic? What are all the versions in between, and how do we build those?
Yes. Yeah, it's filling that gap, isn't it?
Yeah.
So there's this need, and once they step into it, they quickly get drawn into a ban, increasingly negative place. But if we can fill that void with helpful
give them
content,
some counter content. Where's the counter content? You know, where's the other versions? That's I think that's where we've got to turn up for them. And that's for everybody's benefit.
Yes, absolutely. So you touched a little bit on how men can support each other. I wondered what your views are on how men can do that. So how can they support each other in being, you know, better mates, better dads, better husbands, better partners?
We could all do better. But like you say, it's Men's Health Week, so let's focus on that. I think by being willing to sit in awkward conversations with their friends, being willing to hold that space and not answer. You know, we have this model at Movember called ALEC, which it's been used from many organizations. And it's about asking that question in a right environment, maybe asking that second or third question. And then the L is listening. And listening is not something we teach people. It's not something we talk about a lot. You know, we're all about orating and talking, aren't we? But sitting in that space, which can sometimes be hard, not always, and giving people that space to say what's going on and nod and give emphasis and, and join in but not solve. And then the E is about exploring options and then checking in, you know, making sure you come back. And I think for men to be able to do that with each other, and I see men doing it with each other, and I think it is beautiful, and they can be incredibly vulnerable and incredibly kind. And I think they're just words we don't always associate with men, but the warmth and kindness I see between men when they step into some of those vulnerable spaces is just like everybody else's. So I think men need to be able to let their guard down with their closest friends that they care about, so that they can, be a fuller version of themselves.
Yes. Yeah, and I love that we've seen some examples of those kind of friendships in a more visible way, you know, tragically with Rob Burrows and
beautiful,
Kevin,
wasn't it?
Kevin Sinfield and Dave Myers and Cy King, you know, their relationship and friendship. I think also making those relationships more visible also helps make that, you know, absolutely. That's the way men can support each other and make a difference.
I always smile when I see two men telling each other they love each other. I love you, man. Yeah, I love you too. Like, why can't we just see more of that?
Yes, please.
Yeah.
So what's your dream for the future?
Oh.
And why is this work so important to you personally? Because I know, having met you before, I feel that when I meet you, like it just comes out of you.
I think it matters.
What's the driving force?
I think the driving force is I've had the privilege of meeting men around the world, you know, 21 countries in November. I've met a lot of men from a lot of different parts of the world, and they come to us, you know, with open hearts and grow moustaches, and I see change in them, and I see the effect that has on others. And as a mother of 3 daughters, I just see a world in which we can come at gender equality together, and we can have broader roles, both men and women, and that can serve society as a whole. So it's quite altruistic, I suppose. But I've seen firsthand the difference of being open, you know, taking account of your behavior, but also taking action when you notice change in your health, being more present, having those social connections and having meaning and purpose. They're all the things that make for a great life. And I just want to make sure that as many men as possible benefit from that knowledge so that they can have that too.
Wonderful. I love that. And I love what you're doing at Movember as an organisation. You're really bringing about so much positive change. And as you said, there's some really fantastic resources on the website that people can go to find out more information. So do take a visit. So thank you, Sarah, for all your time today and for sharing all your wonderful insights and ideas and inspiration.
Thank you for having me.